An interesting question here, getting into AI.
Hmm.
Um, I've been using ChatGPT for a while to help with my writing, but they just got access to that more specific GPT function where you can train your own GPT or do something more specific.
Hmm.
What are ways that we can use AI to help us language learn, essentially? And this question comes from um, Nomokezu.
Okay. Yeah, there's a ton of companies that have popped up in the past year or two
Tell
with
me
this
about it.
exact idea. I think I've talked to like four, and there's like another four that I know of.
For this
Um,
week, probably.
right, exactly. I just heard about one last week. They got $22 million in funding for a ChatGPT language learning tutor, um, which to me does not make sense, but
Yeah,
to each their own.
seems
Um,
bubbly.
yeah. And then there's another one that just went through Y Combinator doing the same thing. And then our friend Bill is working on a different one. So, and then also Xiaoma just released his own. So it's like,
That's four right there.
yeah. And then there's a fifth one that reached out to
Oh,
us this week. Um, yeah. So, and then I think Speak is probably like another one that they're introducing.
speak?
Yeah, Speak is an English learning. They started in Korea, and they are very heavy emphasis on AI, and they got a $27 million investment from OpenAI recently.
Wow.
So
It's just called speak, straight
it's
up?
just called Speak.
I
Yeah,
mean, to the point, I guess. Can't fault him for
yeah,
that.
exactly. So, anyways, you're not alone in thinking ChatGPT can be a good tutor. There's hundreds of millions of dollars being invested in it right now. So, at the bare minimum, you do need to figure out a good prompt for you. We use one internally, which we could probably post somewhere. But essentially, what it does is it asks ChatGPT to just rewrite it in a corrected way and then bold the things that have been corrected and give a table of the corrections with explanation of why it did each correction. And that, at a basic level, is like it's very good.
Oh.
That's good. All right. So at a basic level, like a good prompt, just asking it to correct you and then explain things is sufficient for most use cases. A lot of the other AIs that are coming out are really geared more towards trying to help you practice specific topics or specific conversations, or correct you on very specific grammar points. But at a base level, you don't really need all of those bells and whistles. You really just need to do the output, do the writing on your own, and then have ChatGPT correct you. If you want to use ChatGPT as a conversation partner, that's when those other tools become more useful. But if it's just a tutor or a correction tool, there's a relatively simple prompt to make that happen.
Yeah, we'll post that somewhere.
Yeah, we can post it afterwards.
Just like the Discord or something.
Yeah.
My personal favorite way is actually well before writing, is I find it really useful to be a dictionary. I have a custom GPT that's pretty good. It does what I want to do, where I'll just feed it a word and a sentence, and it will write a definition for that word and explain the sentence a bit, like in how it works in there, using it as context. Because with Czech dictionaries, it's so common that I just can't find the definition of the word because it's declined or changed totally, or it's just like there's a really, really common colloquial ending that just isn't in any of the dictionaries, and it's so annoying to like constantly have to replace the EJ to be a Y with an accent. Just tell me what the word means, please. And ChatGPT, like I say, it treats me like a human, ironically, whereas the things that are made by humans treat me like robots, treat me like a robot. And it's really nice to just put in a word and it be like, yeah, this means this in this context. It's so nice. Because especially when there's like two words that mean the same thing, right? A common one in Spanish is like amo, as the noun form is a different thing completely than like when it's the conjugated verb. And if you just look up the verb, you might get the wrong thing because it's a dictionary. It doesn't know the context, but ChatGPT does. And so I find it really useful for that. And the other one that I think is helpful is like reformatting things. If you're like grabbing subtitles or whatever. It just having it reformat stuff is so much nicer than dealing with just things without punctuation and whatnot. And the last one that I would do if I was actually trying to like speak faster is train common scenarios. Essentially, it's like, oh, I'm trying to go to travel in Italy. I want to hear a couple times what like might happen when I go into a coffee shop. What are things that they might say? How could I respond? And just like get those examples there without necessarily having to schedule an hour-long session that might cost me whatever amount of money, whatever. And so those are some ways that I use or would use it.
Yeah. Going back to the concept of automaticity, automaticity requires repetition, and often repetition of things that are pretty boring. And you do actually get this a lot with tutors, where every time you switch a tutor, you have to like re-explain who you are as a human being.
Yeah.
So you get really good explaining just that part, and that's an example of automaticity, where you like don't even need to think about what you're saying; it flows out. And so ChatGPT and other AI tutors can definitely be really helpful for practicing those kind of conversations that you're likely to have over and over and over again, just so they become 100% automatic.
And that way it's not literally following a script, because you can change little things here and there. It might respond differently and you get some practice.
Yep.
Guidance on the
correct you as you go. So
correct. Yeah. Guidance on in the chat says that they try to use it almost as like a replacement for SRS by putting in a bunch of new words they learned and saying, write me a story with these words.
Sure, that works too.
It's not perfect, but it's nice to see the words in new contexts and see things. And it's just a nice, unique, different way to mix things up when learning new words. So yeah, I can totally see that.
The one thing that I have not gotten it to do well, and I haven't actually tried recently, so maybe it's improved. I tried to do a shared story writing, where like I write a paragraph and then it writes a paragraph back and forth to like create a story together and like correct me along the way. And what I found is it loses the context of the previous points in the story and starts saying things that don't really make sense of it. So that's the one area where I don't recommend it yet, at least.
The context window increased relatively recently from like 8K tokens to like 128K. And there's one coming soon. I think it's from Mithril AI that has like several million context tokens or something. So like it'll probably be better when you can have more context tokens for it to take into account.
Sure.
But I've also noticed that where it's just, even if it's like the last message, it'll just say things that any human would be able to know are just contradictory statements, but it just doesn't really work like that. And so maybe in GPT-5 it'll be even better than that, but yeah.
In mine it would like mix up characters in the story. And like,
it might have been Gemini that was the humongous context window. There was one of the new ones that's whatever. There's so many things happening.
There's so many of them.
Yeah.